thank you for joining and welcome to our webinar hosted by IC Consult and Ping Identity. And today we have the chance to be joined by an amazing guest speaker. So I'll let the speakers introduce themselves in a minute. So as you guys know, today we are going to talk about fraud protection and how to stay one step ahead with a modern security approach. It's going to be a panel discussion, so not a formal presentation with slides. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat, guys. We'll make sure to answer them at the end. We have saved a bit of time for a Q&A. And with no further ado, let me introduce you to our three amazing speakers. So Florian, do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Florian Jürgens. I'm currently the Chief Information Security Officer of the Forwork Group, mostly famous for the best kitchen appliance in the world, the Thermomix, and fantastic vacuum cleaners. I joined the company around about 3.5 years ago, responsible for the group-wide information security together with my team and also the colleagues who are working in IT security. And I'm really glad to be here today.
Thank you very much, Florian. It's an honor to have you with us today. David, do you want to go next and introduce yourself?
Yeah, David Johnson, lead consultant at IC Consult, doing all the great topics regarding access management and identity access governance. And yeah, with almost, I'm getting old now, 13, 14 years of experience in the field now, doing access management projects and governance projects. And happy to be here today. And yeah, then
amazing. Well, we are happy to have you, David. All right. Well, next, my dear friend Rob. Rob, do you want to say hi?
Yes, thanks, Adam. Merci. Hi, everybody. My name is Rob Otto. I'm the field CTO for EMEA at Europe, Middle East, and Africa at Ping Identity. David has set an interesting precedent in terms of what counts as a long time in this industry. So I'm not going to mention what my count of years is in case anybody thinks I'm too old. But yeah, certainly have been in and around identity and access management, of course, which is what we specialize in here at Ping Identity for many years. I've been at Ping for the last 8 years as a part of the European team, working with a lot of customers around topics relating to identity security, but then also how identity security intersects with things like customer and user experience, things like zero trust architectures, but then also most importantly intersects with combating online fraud. So really looking forward to the discussion today, and lovely to have such wonderful and experienced panelists alongside me. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Rob. This is great. And I'm Adam Ziar. I will be the moderator today. I work for Ping Identity, and as you can hear, I'll try to do my best to not sound too French. So with that, guys, let's jump into the topic. So we have a few questions that we're gonna go through, give the chance to our experts to share the feedback, experience, and views. So I'll start with the first one. So I'll read the question and then I'll hand it over to you guys. So why is fraud protection such an important topic, especially from a CISO's perspective? So I guess Florian, you can start with this one if you're okay.
Yeah, sure, I'm fine. So from my perspective, fraud protection covers two different kind of perspectives. So first of all, the obvious one, it could lead to financial losses, but on the other side, it could also damage the trust from customers, investors, partners, suppliers, and so on and so on. And when I'm talking about trust, this is one of the major priorities from a CISO perspective. So not only priorities, also responsibilities, because cyber attacks often are focusing on stealing data, and this has also very much to do with the trust. So we are talking about to make sure that we can prevent attackers from stealing our data, also our customer data, not only the company ones. And this is also something where we need to make sure that our customers, our partners, and also our suppliers won't lose the trust in us.
That is great feedback. Thank you, Florian. Well, I see David, you are already unmuted. So do you want to go next?
I remember that one, Adam. Yes, please. So I actually concur with Florian. That was also really a reasoning point for me, especially the how you present yourselves towards your customers. So customers really demand from you to have a safe application, to have a safe protection against dealing damage, and that shows also where the mindset should go. So not only that you can be liable as a CISO, that also you would be on the line if something happens, but also the customer first, how it is the public, how this would reflect to the public, but also how you handle things in the public if something happens. That's quite an important topic for a company those days, because we all know with all the emerging new attacks, and if somebody wants to do something really, really badly and has the money to invest in it, um, all your measures can still be on the line and be proven if they really work. So it really shows that you should keep your customers first in mind, because that's then actually the first thing that will fall with your fraud prevention uh, um, setup. For me, then personally, also how the landscape is evolving right now. So a few years ago, big fan of the Chaos Computer Club in Germany, but also internationally. So they came up with quite some techie methods. It's still complicated for people who are not tech savvy, so still a high invest. You have to do quite some research to do really good frauds. And now with the upcoming AI models, that makes it a lot easier. But yeah, I stop right now and give Rob a chance. There you go.
Interesting.
Awesome.
Rob, you wanna comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I think it's quite interesting when we look at the traditional role of the CISO within an organization, and the kind of things that the Chief Information Security Officer was concerned with and was looking after, versus teams within the business that were concerned with fraud more specifically in terms of commercial or financial losses related to fraudulent activities. I think in the past, and then we're going back maybe 5 years or so, we saw a bit of a perception that these two things were not necessarily the same thing. The CISO was responsible for security of information systems and data, whereas the fraud team was responsible for, let's say, protecting the business's revenue stream. A lot of things have happened, I guess, to sort of change that dynamic, though. I mean, on the one hand, so much more of the typical company's business actually being done online, being transacted through those very systems that CISOs are responsible for securing. But I think also the realization, and again, we'll talk about this a little bit later from an identity perspective, that so much fraud, so many of these attacks that we see, whether it's against the systems and the data themselves, or whether it's against the business transactions, actually have identity at the heart of them, right? So account takeover, as an example, is one of the most common fraudulent patterns that we see, or attack patterns that we see. Got some interesting statistics here around companies seeing a rise of over 350% in the impact of account takeover, and that's literally just within the last year, right? And I mean, account takeovers don't only result in losses to the business through fraudulent transactions, right? Adam, I take over your account and I use your saved credit card details to buy some pet food. I think I heard your dog earlier. I don't know if it was yours. Um, and then of course you claim that back against the company because it wasn't you, and then they've suffered a loss. But if I can get to your customer account, what's to stop me using the same techniques to take over David's employee account? Maybe get into one of the financial reporting systems or something like that. So there's a lot of overlap in the attacks against the business and the transactions and stock levels and essentially trying to steal money, and also those kind of attacks that are targeting getting into the company's sensitive infrastructure. So really important, and a lot of the CISOs that I speak to have fraud prevention very much on their agenda at the moment.
Thank you very much, Rob. This is great. And apologize, my dog decided it was the perfect moment to bother me. So hopefully you
Don't
guys
you
can.
worry, we all have them. I'm not sure where mine is, but he will bark soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, thank you for that feedback, guys. We're gonna move to the second question now, which is what methods and technologies can organizations use to strengthen fraud protection? Florian, do you want to go again first?
Yeah, sure. So there are three kind of perspective or approaches. So we are talking about, first of all, the technical ones, so kind of proactive monitoring systems for detection of malicious behavior, maybe some kind of AI-driven analytics to identify some kind of behavior. So this is the technological part. Then we have the organizational part when we're talking about roles and access controls, verification of access rights, to also minimize insider threats. So who has actually access to different kind of data? We are talking about the preventive of unauthorized access. And last one, my favorite part, of course, the organizational part, employee awareness training. Due to the fact that most of the fraud attacks are using the human factor and are originally initiated through social engineering, awareness programs, awareness trainings are extremely essential to decrease the possibility of fraud attacks and increase the overall security level, which is also then again the link to the native information security we talked in the question before.
This is great. David, do you want to go next again?
I have not unmuted again. Okay, or muted in this case. Yeah, surely. So the human factor, although we're asking technologies, should not be taken out of the equation, like Florian said. So most yeah, fun topic, especially if we do some fraud prevention in the company. I hope every company does that by now. So you get your nice little spam email, and our guys are getting quite creative. They wait for special events. They also try to put you under stress duress and see if you click the link. So even seasoned people sometimes fall for it. Yeah. So even if you train them a lot, I cannot emphasize it. You should always keep your people trained, and the human factor is always the weakest link, and that's why we use the technology to try to prevent it more and more. So yeah, what I said. So during my introduction, I also spent some time in Switzerland, and I did the obvious thing you do in Switzerland. I was responsible for the mobile application platform of a banking platform for private banks. And here, for example, a multitude of things needed to be done. So the multi-factor authentication, which we see in companies as well as internal, as also for customers, especially banks, we have to do multi-factor in future. So binding your phone to the banking app was important. So cryptography, that it's still the device you own, and that you also have now in other customer solutions which we only had in banking solutions before because they needed to be especially secure. We could even find out, depending on what was wanted, if people are under stress, if they behave differently, that we could circumvent certain things, because that's important if you have as said, private banks as your customers, and the customer is wants to be protected. Those things sometimes we're used to prevent such things here. So there's a multitude, and I personally like the multi-factor authentication, that it's pushed more and more, but it has some weaknesses, and especially when it comes then to fraud. What I don't like is that most solutions still push out always the MFA request. While in banking, I learned we want to omit this request and actually want for some transactions the customer to actively go there. So it's always jumping between customer friendliness and preventing fraud. So only if the customer did something which would cause an MFA to get in action, then the customer should go to the MFA app and do the multi-factor authentication. While still a lot of applications in normal life, I get this a lot for Microsoft, push out, and you could by accident just be used to it and click OK, while in reality, this was now an attempt to take over your account. And then I would say now it's time for Rob.
Cheers, thank you. Yeah, I mean, look, I think certainly from what we've heard from Florian and David is completely true. I mean, one of the things that really resonates for me, of course, is the importance of education. I think as an organization, when it as it pertains to our own staff, obviously we can do a lot in terms of education. When it's when it's our customers and when it's trying to protect them from falling victim to sort of scams and frauds and all of that, it can be more difficult. We obviously look at a lot of different vectors and a lot of different kinds of attacks that are happening at the moment. Obviously spoken about account takeover, things like new account fraud. All of those are in some ways a little bit easier to deal with because it's one person pretending to be another person via the digital channel, right? And we have techniques which I'll talk about in a second that we can often use to detect that behavior. Scams, though, can be a lot more difficult because in that case, it's not somebody else who's acting on behalf of the real user or the real customer. It is the real customer. They're being coerced via a different channel. They are interacting with their own bank account. They are providing the correct passwords and passcodes and passkeys and all of the rest of it, but they're doing so for the wrong reason, and that can be more difficult to deal with. When we talk about technologies and we talk about approaches that we can use here, one thing that I've noticed over sort of being around this industry for several years is that there really is a lot of technology out there, right? There are a lot of different tools and products and capabilities that will allow you to spot signals of fraud, right? There are technologies that will allow you to make decisions relating to whether something is likely to be fraudulent or malicious or whether it's not. What we believe at Ping Identity, and it's a model that we've built within our product portfolio and we've sort of pulled together, is more of a consistent framework for how an organization can aim to tackle fraud in such a way as to not always create a very high friction user experience. And the way that we describe this, it's quite straightforward. It's 3 steps. We call them detect, decide, then mitigate. And detect is obviously about collecting signals. It's about looking at as much information as you can about what the user is trying to do, what the transaction is, has the user authenticated? If so, how? What do we know about their device, about their location, about their behavior? Anything that we can collect. Think about this as really just gathering information that's going to help us to make a good decision. So that's the detect phase. The second phase that we have to do is the decide phase. And this is really driven by policy. This is our policy-based decisioning, where we take the information that we've collected, we aggregate it, we use a business-friendly rules engine that gives us fine-grained control to analyze the data, analyze how those various different signals interact with each other or perhaps don't, to ultimately give us a clear decision as to what we should do. This goes beyond necessarily just calculating a risk score. It goes more towards saying, given all of the risk factors, all of the signals that we've seen, what is the most appropriate thing that we should do to mitigate this risk? And then the third part, the mitigation part, is where we then inform our user journey or our user experience in terms of what it is that should be done in this case. And again, the mitigation can, in a lot of cases, be no action at all, because if we have the strategy defined well, and we have the correct tooling, signaling, and decisioning, we will then be able to identify those scenarios and those transactions where the risk of fraud is actually very low, as well as those where it might be high. And so in the case where we have a sense or a signal of very low risk of fraud, we can in fact reduce the friction for the user and not add any additional mitigation, allow their transaction to proceed without perhaps an MFA step up if the risk is low. On the other side, though, when our decision tells us that we need to take further action to make sure that it is a legitimate person, it is a legitimate transaction, we can then drive our user orchestration to select from the most appropriate mitigation strategy. That might be a multi-factor authentication step up. It might be doing identity verification. It might be stopping the transaction altogether, locking the user's account, raising an alert for the Security Operations Center to look into. Ultimately, for us, it's really important that we have a range of techniques available to us for mitigation, and that our decisioning can drive us to follow the right one at the right point. And that's probably me talking way too much about that. But detect, decide, mitigate is the way that we advise solving this problem with technology.
Thank you, Rob. That was perfect, right in time. Okay, well, guys, moving to the next question. How do you see the connection between fraud protection and traditional information security? Florian, do you want to go first?
Mm-hmm. So for me, the connection lies in sharing the same goal. So fraud protection and information security both have the goal to protecting the organization from harm. So information security, of course, safeguard data and systems, and on the other side, fraud protection, some kind of extend these measures to prevent economic damage. So for me personally, fraud protection is therefore some kind of subset of information security with the same goal, but with a prioritization, with a focus on mitigating financial losses. So this is for me actually the connection between these two topics.
Great, thank you. Well, I guess we should switch a bit, Rob, if you're okay to follow up here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Florian's got it spot on. I think that when organizations are joined up in their thinking around how to combat what is essentially cybercrime, where they have different parts of the organization that are focused on the same ultimate goal, working together well, that's where you're going to get the best results. Fraud protection, fraud prevention should not be seen only as something that is a business problem that the business cares about or that fraud experts care about. It's something that intersects very deeply with information security, because information security often is the answer or has the tooling that can really make a measurable impact on reducing fraud. So it's when these two functions attempt to work as separate islands, right, rather than part of the same whole. I think that it becomes a lot easier for fraudsters to get in. David, your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I hope the connection is working again because last sentence I couldn't hear you. Sorry, Rob. But I'll just jump in right away. So yeah, it was a bit hard a question for me because how can they not be connected? So Florian and Rob brought it right to the point that it's yeah basically also subset, but it has to work together. But getting to that question, what sticks out mostly in those discussions I had was the risk management. It's always fun to have this risk metrics ahead of you. And then, did you really account for everything in the risk assessment? Is it really 360 degrees? Did you look at all the aspects of it, especially when it comes to customers internally, depending on which kind of industry you are? It's well not easy, but it's a bit easier the decision. So the employee has to do a bit more effort and has to get ahead and yeah do what is needed in order to get the proper access, yeah, multi-factor everything, use the right location and whatsoever. But when it comes to customers, um, I always thought about in the risk management, okay, now we covered the IT security part, now we covered the internal damage that could be done. But how would you explain this to a customer if something happens? It's not always the discussion whether this will happen or not happen. Something will happen in our modern world as soon as you're connected to the internet. Even without connection, you can do some shenanigans. But um, how could you explain this to a customer? And that's what I always do at the end of such a risk management exercise. Like, yeah, and now could we explain this to a customer why we did it certain ways? Will the customer run away because it's too tedious, or will the customer sack us for not being tedious enough at the end? And that's where cybersecurity or the classic information security and fraud prevention sometimes clashes. And I like those discussions, and they need to be done in order to get you a really holistic risk assessment of the whole situation.
I mean, maybe just to add to what you said there really quickly, if that's okay. I mean, it's an important point around how everything that we do internally within an organization ultimately is for the benefit of whoever our customers are outside there. I always find it funny when I speak to people within a business and they say, "Oh, we don't have any customers." Everybody ultimately has a customer. That's why we do the things we do. But I think that sometimes when we do have this kind of disconnect between, what the fraud teams are doing and what the information security, the CISO, let's call it more of the internal security teams are doing, you can end up creating a really sort of false sense of security, right? So, hey, my digital channels are completely safe because I've got all the latest and greatest bot detection and account takeover protection and everything on my e-commerce site. But if I can just rather go around the corner to somebody who works in the organization and convince them to click on a phishing email and get into the internal inventory system that way, it kind of defeats the purpose. So these two things really do need to go, be very closely aligned in order to keep customers secure. It's probably obvious, but I felt it was worth restating.
Yeah,
This is perfect.
totally
Thank you.
agree.
And feel free to jump in, guys, if you want to interact. But before we move to the next question, just wanted to remind you guys that we have a chat function. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in there and we'll review all the questions at the end. So we're getting close to the presentation, guys. So now is the right time. And with that being said, I'm moving to the next question. So now, guys, we're looking at real examples, real use cases. So can you provide concrete examples, real use cases where fraud protection was particularly relevant? And I guess again, Florian, if you wanna
Yeah,
finish this one up.
yeah, sure. I think the most obvious one, looking back to the last, I don't know, months, is a CEO fraud. So kind of business email compromise, where a fraudster impersonates the CEO requesting some kind of money transfer. And yeah, what can you do about it or against it? A strict approval process, employee awareness training, maybe some kind of technical measures to make sure that your employees recognize when it's an email outside of your company and not an internal email, even if the name or the sender address might be the same one. Um, and this is also a topic which is now getting more and more important due to the use of AI. We're talking about deep fake videos, which are now being used while you are in a video conference, in a Zoom call, Microsoft Teams call, or something like that, to impersonate that you are another person. So I think this is one of the obvious examples.
That's a great one. Rob, do you want to go next?
Yeah, thanks, Adam. So, I mean, look, I think that there are there are so many examples of the kinds of fraud that people try to perpetrate, and sometimes the ways in which you counter these things are not always obvious. So, I'm probably going to go through three really quick examples, if that's okay. Not to talk for too long, but maybe just to highlight um, a number of different sort of approaches that we've seen. And these are obviously all sort of companies that we've worked with before. Um, and the first was I won't go into any specifics about who the company was, but essentially they had a large scale problem with account takeover, which was leading to inventory losses, right? So again, the way that the attack works is that um, attackers find stolen usernames and passwords on the dark web. These things are very easy to come by, and working on sort of human nature, we know that people reuse passwords, usernames, and passwords across different websites. And so they ran. They didn't do anything like a sort of an obvious bot attack, right, where they were just flooding our customer's website with hundreds and hundreds of requests every second. They were doing it a lot more slowly, but they were just automating and just feeding through, trying these various different combinations of usernames and passwords until they got to the point where they could successfully get into a customer's account. Once they were in the customer's account, then of course they could start to do some other things such as changing shipping addresses, and then starting to essentially order products using a stored or a pre-existing credit arrangement that the legitimate customer had. So, and this was quite interesting because a lot of the time when people look at sort of takeover of online accounts, we tend to think, well, so what, right? If you take over my Facebook account, that's fine. You can see all my pictures. But in this case, a real sort of retail example where access to that online account, gives you access to real world inventory, and the losses to this organization in terms of this inventory that was being stolen was absolutely staggering. Again, there the answer for us was a combination of the approaches I've talked about, using intelligence, using risk signaling and detection to spot these kind of attacks happening, and then intervening with sort of targeted multi-factor authentication. In some cases, proactively locking accounts, proactively delaying shipments of devices in order to make sure that it was legitimate. So that was one example, and again, probably quite a straightforward example. A different example, which is one of our customers in the banking sector, and of course we spoke a little bit around scams more than fraud specifically. So there's a growing trend for what we call authorized push payment fraud, right? Where again, as I said before, it is the legitimate account holder who is approving the transaction, but they're doing so because they've been scammed. They've received an email saying that it's from a relative who's on vacation and needs funds to get home, or it's a romance scam, or it's somebody pretending to be a family member needing money in a hurry. Any of these kinds of things. And the approach that we've taken to help mitigate that kind of fraud is really around what we call consequence messaging, right? It's around looking at the risk signals and then just delivering messaging to the customer through the channel that they're in to say, hey, before you click that button, just stop and think, tell us, why are you making this payment? This person that you're making the payment to, is it somebody that you know? Is it somebody that you've just met? This business, are you sure it's a reputable business? A lot of the things to try and reduce some of the sense of urgency that fraudsters and scammers love to create when they are trying to socially engineer people into giving them money. And that was very interesting because it is a way of adding targeted friction into a user journey based on really looking at the details, running really detailed policies to help us to determine what is the most appropriate messaging to use. And that, again, that was the second example. The third one, to sort of go through very quickly, and this is something that we at Ping Identity are really focusing on a lot, is the concept of what we call verified trust within a transaction, within an interaction between parties. Florian has mentioned deepfakes, right? We all are, awake late at night thinking about deepfakes, thinking about the ability to pretend to be somebody else completely different, to do so through the channels that we use every day, through video conferencing, through voice notes, voice messaging, and again, being able to do that in a way that's generally undetectable to the normal human eye, right? So there's a very famous story about an employee at a bank who was tricked into making a 7-figure payment because they believed they were on a video call with the CFO, when in fact every person on that call was a deepfake. We have a customer who has a similar situation that they're trying to solve, where they have people who they are hiring for new jobs who are essentially impersonating one another and using deepfakes to get through the interview process. So you interview one candidate, you're very impressed with the candidate and their skills and their knowledge. The person who shows up to work on day one is not the same person. So for us, this concept of verified trust, the concept of using identity verification at the point of an interaction, at the point of making a transaction. So as an example, on that video call with the CFO who's asking you, via a Zoom call to transfer, $10 million to a certain account, you could pick up your phone using your verified trust app. You could send a message through the corporate directory to the CFO. You're verified with a facial biometric at that point. You send a message to the CFO to say, hey, I'm on a call with you, and you just asked me to transfer $100,000. Is that right? And the CFO, if it is them, can again look at their phone, facial biometric, picks up that it's them, verified trust, and they can send a reply, again, via a completely different secure channel to say, yeah, that was me, or I don't know what you're talking about. I'm on the golf course. I'm not on a call with you. Get off that right now. So again, the most important thing here is really having that set of different mitigation techniques and different detection techniques that we can use depending on what the channel is and what the circumstance is. David, I've probably used up way too much time with that. Any thoughts from your side?
Yeah. Also took my topic with banking. So yeah, great example always with banks being one of the obvious companies that are always aimed for where there's money, there's money to get. So like you said, the companies have to implement further processes to um, yeah, to verify if this is really the person that you're talking with. And I saw one company, I know where it should have prevented, but was not personally involved, but family members were part of this company, where they lost a lot of money for quite an easy scam, which could have prevented even by those processes. So you need to have them in place to have a proper mitigation there. So that brings me back to access management, but it is at the end, first of all, person should not one person should of course be able to do such transactions right away. Of course, if this is the customer, it's a different story. There you have to go around with other mitigations. And secondly, how to verify that this was really the order you got from your boss. So in the past, you got a call and then like get onto it. Yeah, I want to have it now, especially if you're the assistant to a C-level member, you're under constant stress, and there you need those methods to prevent such things for happening. Um, I also like this now. The companies getting more tedious when it comes to SIM swapping, which was obviously quite a topic when working in banking. Again, heavy background in banking, so sorry for always bringing those examples. But yeah, how do you prevent that, and how can you simply prevent somebody to get access to 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 an account simply by swapping the phone number? And this is something where at least then banking apps are now cryptographically bound to your mobile phone, and simply swapping the SIM will not help you to mitigate now the TAN, because the TAN is now pushed by sometimes a different app, which is secured separately in a container. And that all helps to prevent such frauds in future, where in the past a lot of banks used, for example, SIM push, and even people with not a million on their account were victim to it, because it was just so plain easy to convince the mobile phone company that you need a new SIM card. That's again customer friendliness versus security. Brings us back to the risk harmonized or yeah, full risk approach. But this happened in the past, and I like how it's going now, that at least those easy scams, which happened in the past for a lot of companies, are not on topic anymore. And now we have to get ahead of the game again. Well, we can't get ahead of the game, but we have to stay with it and try to prevent now the more sophisticated scam in future by the use of AI, by the use of behavioral analytics, which we did even before AI. But now we can use those technologies to make it even more comprehensive, because if you have a customer driven, or also in a larger company, a human being can't check this anymore. And here, a lot of companies are already going for the AI driven or behavioral driven analytics to stop things from happening. And I would rather be happy to be locked out again because I switched my VPN too fast than to be a victim to a scam. So here I can say that at least a lot of companies have this in place, and this prevented quite some shenanigans going on with push approval, like you said, Rob, because that really was the case I had in the past, and it was then simply prevented by the location of the user not being in a safe environment. So then it clicked, but this could have gone sideways as well.
Thank you, David. That's great feedback and pretty scary to see what's happening in that world. But um, so, guys, we are done with the questions. We hope that you guys appreciated this format. We were trying to find something different than how we usually approach those webinars. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And yeah, as mentioned earlier, feel free to jump on the chat, drop your questions. We have a few more minutes. I can't believe we managed to stay under the 45 minutes. That's a huge achievement, guys. So we have a bit of time, guys. Feel free to use the chat. We are here to answer your questions.
So, Adam, while we're waiting for a question or two to come in, not that I always have to have the last word. Uh, I'm actually determined to get Florian to have the last word. So, but something that David said about sort of SIM swap detection in particular, sort of quite resonates with me. Is that a lot of the time when we are trying to spot fraud, it's not really that any of the individual things that are being done are particularly complex or difficult to spot. Sometimes it can just be trying to spot the correlation between them and trying to find enough of these things that kind of come together for us. I mean, it's not, um, there are many places that we can go and we can check in real time to see if a SIM card has been swapped. And if we decided that was the only thing that we were going to do, we would probably cut out a lot of fraud, but we would probably also have so many false positives, sort of coming into that, because SIM swap alone, while it is an important vector, it doesn't necessarily mean that every transaction that's being performed via a phone where a SIM has been swapped is necessarily fraudulent. So the challenge in being able to really again, I'll use the word orchestrate and aggregate all of the signals that we're getting, and allow the people who really understand fraud, who really are studying these patterns, the data scientists, the real fraud specialists, to be in charge of building the policies and maintaining and monitoring those policies so that they're able to react quickly to them. So a new attack comes up and we start to see, right, this attack involves a combination of a SIM swap together with having recently changed a shipping address. So let's have a specific policy that looks just for those two, for those two things, and puts that together. And then let's come up with a specific mitigation that we might want to do just for those things, giving you that agility in the process, being able to adapt quickly to fraud with tooling that allows you to make those changes quickly. I think that's a pretty big point.
Yeah,
Florian,
thanks.
let me ask you if you have any thoughts on any of that.
No, you're right. I only can confirm that. Yeah, I think that the whole fraud protection topic will be getting more and more relevant for all of the companies, due to the fact that it's now much easier to impersonate another person. Like I said, using AI, deepfake, voice fake, and so on and so on. And on the other side, it's much more profitable and compared to other criminal actions.
Lovely. Well, I don't think we have any questions, guys. So that means you were perfect and super clear. So I think on that, we can probably close it. And thank you very much to all our attendees. I hope you really enjoyed this content, this format. And if you're interested, we'll make the replay available in a few days. I don't want to bother you with an email, but feel free to reach out to me. I'll send it over. On a WeTransfer or something like that. But yeah, if you're interested, I can share it in a couple of days. And with that, thank you guys for being here. David, Rob, Florian. I think it's been a great session, great content, and yeah, looking forward to another one altogether.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank you
you.
guys.
Have a
Have a
great
good day.
time. See you soon, Adam. Bye
See you
bye.
guys soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.